What happens when one of America's most relentless provocateurs goes head-to-head with one of television's fiercest guardians of fairness on the nation's biggest morning stage? The studio lights gleamed brightly over the CBS Mornings set as the tension in the room began to simmer. The usual calm atmosphere of the morning news show was replaced by an undercurrent of anticipation. Megyn Kelly, known for her poise and fierce dedication to principles of fairness, sat with her legs crossed and hands folded neatly in front of her. She was the epitome of professionalism, but today, her calm demeanor concealed a firestorm of opinions, ready to be unleashed. Across from her, Tucker Carlson sat with his signature smirk, prepared to do what he does best: challenge, provoke, and criticize. Tonight, they weren't here to talk about the latest celebrity gossip or trivial topics of the day. No. Tonight was about something far more serious. Tonight, they would tackle a question that had haunted America's legal system for decades. Is the judicial system truly fair? The focal point of the debate was a name that had been plastered across news channels and social media for weeks. Tyler Robinson, the man accused of killing a close ally of President Donald Trump. Robinson's case was already embroiled in controversy. Despite overwhelming circumstantial evidence, the question that had divided the nation wasn't whether he had committed the crime, but whether he was being treated fairly by the system. The studio's audience shifted nervously, and the stage was set for what promised to be one of the most intense and important debates of the year. Megyn Kelly opened the conversation in her calm, measured way, her voice resonating through the microphones and into the living rooms of millions of viewers. "Good morning, Tucker. It's always a pleasure to have you here, especially when we're discussing something as significant as the fairness of the justice system." She paused, her eyes locking onto his. Tyler Robinson, as you know, has been accused of murder, and while his case remains under investigation, there's been an outcry from both sides of the political spectrum regarding his treatment. As you and I know, the principle of presumption of innocence is a cornerstone of our justice system, and yet, for some reason, there's been an overwhelming rush to judgment. But before we dive in, let me ask you, do you believe the justice system is treating Tyler fairly? Tucker shifted in his seat, his expression momentarily softening before he leaned forward with his trademark intensity. "Megyn, I think you know my position on this. Our justice system is supposed to protect the innocent, to provide a fair trial to every individual, regardless of political affiliation or personal biases. But let's look at the facts here. Tyler Robinson is someone who, by all accounts, was an outspoken supporter of President Trump. The moment that happens, we see a level of scrutiny and disdain that is simply not applied to left-wing criminals. Do you think that's fair?" The audience's murmur of agreement was palpable, and Megyn could feel the room shift with Tucker's words. The divide between left and right had never been more pronounced, and tonight's discussion would inevitably expose the deep fractures in the way the justice system was perceived. Megyn maintained her composure, but her voice carried a subtle edge of resolve. "Tucker, I understand the frustration, but this is precisely why we need to stick to the principle of presumption of innocence. Regardless of his political affiliations, Tyler Robinson deserves a fair trial. He deserves to have the evidence presented in court without bias, and the law must remain blind to any political connections. Do you disagree with that?" Tucker's eyes gleamed, and he sat back in his chair, visibly ready to launch into his next argument. "I don't disagree that Robinson deserves a fair trial, but let's talk about the bias in the system. We've seen time and time again how left-wing individuals are given more leniency in the judicial process, while those on the right, especially Trump supporters, are made an example of. The hypocrisy is infuriating. This isn't about fair treatment for Robinson. It's about the system bending over backward to protect criminals who support the left while punishing anyone who associates with Trump. That's the issue here." The tension in the room deepened, and the audience shifted in their seats. Megyn's calm, composed demeanor remained, but the growing heat in her tone suggested that the gloves were about to come off. "I think the real question here, Tucker, is whether or not our justice system is truly politicized. Is the fairness of the system contingent upon one's political views? Should we allow ourselves to be manipulated by political ideologies that prevent us from fairly judging people based on the evidence? That's the line we're walking right now. So, yes, We must consider the facts in front of us. But we can't forget our duty to protect everyone's right to a fair trial, no matter where they stand politically. Tucker nodded, his expression sharp and determined. I agree that Tyler Robinson deserves a fair trial. But I also believe that the moment the system begins to allow political affiliations to influence verdicts, we lose our way. How is it fair that Trump supporters are treated with such disdain, while those who align with the left seem to be given a pass for the same crimes? It's not just the case of Robinson, it's a systemic issue. Megyn leaned in slightly, her posture steady and unyielding. Tucker, I don't think anyone is denying that political bias can play a role in the judicial process. But we can't throw out the principle of fairness just because there are flaws in the system. We have to address those flaws while still upholding the values that make our system one of the fairest in the world. Tucker's response was immediate, sharp, and punctuated with anger. And that's exactly what I'm saying, Megyn. If we don't address the bias, we'll never fix the system. We need to hold these people accountable, and that includes the political establishment that's rigged the system for their benefit. If we keep pretending that everyone is being treated equally, we're ignoring the truth. The back and forth was only heating up. The tension between the two was palpable, as Megyn and Tucker each defended their respective views with increasing passion. But what was at stake was much larger than a single case. The entire conversation exposed the fractures in American society, the widening gulf between right and left, between those who trust the justice system and those who believe it's been hijacked for political gain. The atmosphere in the studio had reached a boiling point. Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson were no longer just engaging in a polite back and forth. They were entrenched in a battle of ideologies. Each word, each pause, each facial expression carried weight, and the growing tension was palpable. The audience, once a sea of polite faces, was now split, one side showing support for Megyn's reasoned, principle-driven arguments, the other firmly standing with Tucker's fiery critiques of a system he believed was rigged. Megyn Kelly, ever composed, leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but filled with a quiet authority. Tucker, we keep coming back to political bias, and I don't disagree that bias exists. But what I am saying is that we cannot allow ourselves to be so consumed by that bias that we lose sight of what makes our judicial system just in the first place: presumption of innocence. Tucker's lips tightened into a thin line, and he shook his head slowly, almost in disbelief. Megyn, you're missing the bigger picture here. We're not talking about just bias anymore. We're talking about systematic manipulation of the justice system. We've seen it time and time again, people on the right being targeted, being treated unfairly, while those on the left are given a free pass. How can we talk about fairness when there's such clear disparity? Megyn inhaled deeply, gathering her thoughts before responding. I'm not denying that the system isn't perfect. It's far from it. But that's why we have to fight for it. We have to work to fix the system from within, not throw it all out in frustration. Yes, there are flaws, but Tyler Robinson's case isn't about political corruption. It's about ensuring that justice is served based on the facts, not on someone's political affiliation. Tucker's eyes narrowed, and his voice became more intense. But that's just the point, Megyn. The system isn't serving justice anymore. It's serving a political agenda. You cannot ignore the fact that the left-wing side of the political spectrum seems to get a pass in so many of these cases. From celebrities to political elites, they're given leniency, while people on the right are hammered into the ground. Megyn's jaw tightened slightly, but she remained unshaken. And yet, we are all entitled to a fair trial. This is not about who gets a pass and who doesn't. This is about ensuring that everyone, no matter their political affiliation, gets a fair opportunity to defend themselves. You cannot simply disregard the system because it isn't perfect, Tucker. The consequences of doing so would be catastrophic. The audience, still split in their support, murmured in agreement with both sides. Some were nodding along with Megyn's emphasis on the fairness of the system, while others clenched their fists, agreeing with Tucker's assertion that something deeply corrupt had taken root within the judicial process. The debate was intensifying, and the stakes were high. Tucker leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly on the desk in front of him. I hear you, Megyn, but how can you deny the evidence that something is fundamentally broken in our justice system? We have one set of rules for people in power, people with connections, people who align with the political elite, and another set of rules for everyday Americans. The prosecution of people like Tyler Robinson is a prime example. The way Trump supporters are treated by the system, it's like they're guilty until proven innocent. Megyn paused, considering his words carefully before speaking again. I think you're oversimplifying the issue. The presumption of innocence is a bedrock principle of our justice system. Just because someone is accused or even guilty in the public eye does not mean they should be condemned before their day in court. The system isn't designed to serve the elite, Tucker. It's designed to serve everyone, even those who are guilty in the eyes of the public. Tucker's face tightened. But what happens when the public perception is built on a consistent pattern of injustice? The way Tyler Robinson is being treated, the way he's being portrayed in the media, this isn't just about perception. It's about real damage to his reputation. And what about the countless other Trump supporters who faced biased legal treatment? You can't ignore that. Megyn's calm demeanor barely wavered. I'm not ignoring that, but I am saying that we cannot judge the judicial system by the mistakes of a few. Sure, there's bias, but it's also crucial that we work within the system to correct it. If we simply abandon the system because of its flaws, we risk losing everything. And who benefits from that? Those who don't want any justice at all. Tucker's voice grew more forceful, his tone sharpening. Megyn, the system is broken, and you know it. Every day, the media and the legal establishment push a narrative that favors one side of the political spectrum. And who pays the price? People like Tyler Robinson. People who dare to align themselves with Trump, who are cast as enemies of the state, simply because of their political views. You're sitting here defending a system that has long been corrupted, and I'm just not willing to do that anymore. The debate was no longer just about Tyler Robinson. It had become a battle of ideologies. Megyn Kelly, the defender of the system, and Tucker Carlson, the staunch critic of its corruption, were now locked in a clash that went beyond the case at hand. The personal stakes had risen as they both fought to prove their point, unwilling to give an inch. Megyn's voice remained steady, though the sharpness in her tone was undeniable. I don't believe in this notion that the system is out to get certain people. What I believe in is that the system is flawed and that we need to fix it, not tear it down. The answer isn't to dismantle the very thing that could help us achieve justice for everyone. Tucker shot back. And I think that's where we fundamentally disagree, Megyn. The system is no longer capable of providing justice, at least not for those on the right. I'm not saying we should tear it down completely, but I am saying that we need a radical overhaul. We need to make sure that justice applies equally, not based on political affiliation. The room buzzed with energy, and the intensity of the debate reached its peak. The audience, which had previously been divided, was now watching intently, every word hanging in the air, waiting for the next round. Both Megyn and Tucker had staked their claims. Megyn, defending the integrity of the judicial system and the principle of fairness. Tucker, calling for systemic change and holding nothing back in his critique of the system's perceived bias. As the debate raged on, Megyn Kelly shifted gears, recognizing the need to address the underlying issue of accountability. Tucker, I hear your concerns, but we can't let the actions of a few corrupt individuals color our view of the entire system. We have to continue pushing for accountability, real accountability. And that means holding everyone, regardless of political affiliation, accountable for their actions. Tucker shot back. I agree, but let's be honest here. Accountability isn't always applied equally. You know as well as I do that when Trump supporters are involved in legal cases, the system throws the book at them. But when it comes to left-wing individuals, the system goes soft. So yes, while I agree that accountability is key, we need to ensure that it's consistent. Megyn's eyes narrowed slightly, her voice calm but firm. We both know that there are flaws in how the system works, but that doesn't mean we should abandon the principles that make our legal system one of the fairest in the world. We can't let frustration with the system lead us to undermine its foundation. That's where we'll lose everything. Tucker leaned forward, his face filled with intensity. And I'm saying we can't accept the status quo anymore. We can't sit here and pretend everything is fine when it's not. The system isn't working for the people who need it the most. It's broken, Megyn, and we need to fix it before it's too late. The exchange had gone from a civil debate to a heated argument, and the energy in the room was at a fever pitch. The audience, now fully invested, watched as the two titans of media squared off, their disagreement not just about Tyler Robinson's case, but about the very heart of America's justice system. The stakes were high, and neither side was willing to back down. Tucker Carlson, with his usual sharp wit, didn't pull any punches. "I think we've said enough here. The system is broken, and you can pretend all you want that it isn't. But the truth is, it's rigged. The left-wing elites are protected, and people like Robinson are left to face the full force of the law, while the real criminals get a free pass." Megyn Kelly, holding her ground, didn't flinch. "And I'll continue to say this. The system is not broken. But we can't just sit back and watch it fail. We need to fix it. We need to hold people accountable, and we need to ensure that everyone is given the fair trial they deserve." The energy in the room had shifted. What began as a thought-provoking exchange had now morphed into a full-blown ideological war. The audience, once polite and intrigued, was now visibly divided. Their reactions were no longer subtle. Each comment from Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson was met with either enthusiastic applause or shocked silence. The atmosphere was tense, each word weighing heavily in the room. Megyn Kelly sat at her desk, her posture straight, her face an impassive mask of professionalism. But behind her calm demeanor, she was engaged in a battle of wills. Tucker Carlson, her adversary for the evening, leaned forward, his eyes locked on her with a look of unyielding determination. It was clear that both were fully invested in this conversation, and neither was about to back down. "Megyn," Tucker began, his voice slightly sharper now, "I understand what you're trying to say. You want to hold on to the ideal of fairness, the belief that our justice system is the best in the world. But we can't ignore the fact that the system has been manipulated. We've seen it time and time again. From left-wing activists being given a pass to the systematic targeting of Trump supporters, the system isn't just flawed, it's rigged. And Tyler Robinson's case is the perfect example of that." Megyn's expression didn't change. She wasn't surprised by his words. She had expected this line of attack. However, she wasn't about to let it go unchallenged. "Tucker, I get your frustration. Believe me, I do. But that's exactly the point: frustration. You're allowing your emotions to cloud your judgment. The system isn't perfect, but it's not rigged either. It's a system that has served the country well for over 2 centuries, and it's our duty to fix what's broken, not tear it down." Tucker scoffed, clearly frustrated by her stance. "Megyn, with all due respect, you're being naive. This isn't about fixing a few broken pieces. This is about systemic bias. We're talking about a justice system where people are judged based on their political affiliations, not the facts. It's the people who hold power, the people who run the system, that are creating these disparities. And it's those people who need to be held accountable." Megyn tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. She had heard this argument before, and while she understood the frustration, she couldn't allow Tucker to ignore the principles that had made America's justice system a beacon for the world. "You're right, Tucker. There are flaws, and there are people who misuse their power. But that's why we have a system of checks and balances. That's why we have judges, courts, and laws to make sure justice is served, not based on political leanings, but on facts." "Checks and balances?" Tucker interrupted, his voice rising. "You're telling me that the checks and balances system is working when we see political elites getting away with crimes while average people are locked up for minor offenses? The system is working for some, sure, but not for everyone. That's the problem, Megyn." The tension in the room was thick, and the audience could feel the energy growing hotter with each exchange. Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson were no longer just debating the fairness of the justice system. They were now engaged in a personal battle of convictions. Megyn's voice remained calm, but there was a steely edge to her words. "Tucker, I understand your anger, and I agree that the system is not always fair. But we can't throw out the principles that make it work just because we feel it's not serving us in the moment. The idea of presumption of innocence is one of the cornerstones of our justice system. It's what protects all of us, whether we like it or not. We can't ignore that for the sake of political expediency." Tucker shot back immediately, his voice full of emotion. "Political expediency? This isn't about politics, Megyn. This is about justice. The justice system is supposed to be impartial, but it's not. We have a system that lets left-wing extremists get away with literal crimes, while people on the right, who simply support the president, are treated like criminals. This is not justice, it's political persecution. Megyn's expression hardened. She wasn't about to let Tucker's sweeping generalizations go unchecked. I understand that people feel frustrated with how some cases are handled, but we can't use that as an excuse to abandon the very principles that protect us all. Tyler Robinson is entitled to a fair trial, just as anyone else. And that trial should be based on evidence, not on his political views or affiliations. The audience's restlessness grew palpable. Some cheered in agreement with Megyn's firm stance, while others sat with their arms crossed, nodding in agreement with Tucker's criticism. It was clear that this was no longer just a discussion about one man's case. This was about something much larger, about how the judicial system was perceived, and about the deep divide in the country. Tucker, sensing the shift in momentum, decided to go for a more direct, personal attack. Megyn, I've been in this business long enough to know when someone is making excuses. You're defending a system that's failing. You're defending a system that doesn't care about justice, it cares about maintaining power. If you're willing to overlook the corruption, the bias, and the injustice, then maybe you're not seeing the full picture. Megyn's eyes narrowed, and for the first time that evening, there was a visible crack in her calm demeanor. Tucker, I'm not making excuses. I'm defending a principle, and that principle is fairness. Yes, our system is flawed. Yes, it's imperfect. But it's also a system that has allowed people from all walks of life to get a fair shot. And that includes Tyler Robinson, regardless of his political views. Also, Tucker's eyes flashed with frustration. And I'm telling you, Megyn, the fairness is a myth. It's only fair to those who have the right connections, the right politics, and the right amount of influence. I'm not talking about minor flaws. I'm talking about a system that is systematically rigged against anyone who challenges the establishment, and you're sitting here defending it. Megyn didn't flinch. I'm defending the idea of fairness, Tucker. I'm defending the principle that everyone, regardless of their political leanings, should be treated equally before the law. And I will continue to defend that principle, even if it's uncomfortable. Tucker leaned forward again, his voice dripping with disdain. Fairness? What about the people who are actually affected by the system's biases, Megyn? What about the Trump supporters who are treated as criminals just for voicing their support? What about the activists and protesters who get away with breaking the law, while others are jailed for the same thing? What about that? The tension between the two was palpable, the ideological divide so wide that it felt like they were speaking two entirely different languages. But as the seconds ticked by, it became clear that this debate was no longer just about facts or figures. It was a battle of convictions, a clash of belief systems. Look, Megyn, Tucker said, his tone softening slightly. I don't want to make this personal, but you've got to see that the system isn't just imperfect, it's broken. And it's broken because it's been hijacked by political elites who don't have to play by the same rules as the rest of us. Honestly. Megyn's face softened, and she leaned in, her voice calm but resolute. I agree with you that there are powerful people who have abused the system, but that doesn't mean the entire system is broken. We can fix the flaws, we can make it better, but we cannot abandon the principles that have allowed this country to thrive. If we do, we lose everything. Tucker's expression hardened again, his fists clenching slightly. And I'm telling you, Megyn, those principles are being used as a shield to protect the very people who are destroying the system. We can't fix anything if we keep pretending that the system is fair for everyone. The debate was nearing its end, and the weight of their words hung heavy in the air. The audience was still split, but the ideological divide between Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson had never been more apparent. The tension between them wasn't just about the fairness of the justice system, it was about the future of America itself, and the battle for what kind of country they wanted to be. As the show wrapped up, Megyn and Tucker exchanged one final, intense look. The cameras had captured every second of their battle, and it was clear that this conversation wasn't just about Tyler Robinson or the justice system. It was about the deep divide in America, the tension between political factions, and the fight for the soul of the country. Megyn Kelly closed the debate with a calm but powerful statement. This debate may have no easy answers, Tucker, but it's one that we must continue to have. We can disagree on the details, but at the end of the day, we must all agree that justice must be blind to politics. That is the foundation of our system. Tucker nodded, his expression still resolute. And I'll continue to fight for a system that is fair for everyone. The lights dimmed, and the credits began to roll. The battle may have ended for the night, but the questions remained, lingering in the air like a challenge thrown at the audience.